sent out a survey to our alum, and we heard back that the two biggest topics that you all wanted to hear back from was how do you manage your career for promotion, or how do you handle career management? Because I think it's even bigger than promotion, which I'm looking forward to learning more from Carl, Melody, and Mike on career management hacks. And then second, which is interesting, how do you balance your work and life? Which sometimes when you're trying to gun for managing your career and get that promotion, sometimes that work-life balance, in my experiences, it kind of gets in the way. So I look forward to spending time with you all, and I'm going to introduce our panel here. And first, we have Melody. I'm going to introduce Melody here, and Melody transitioned from the Air Force in 2010, and she transitioned to Kraft Foods into a marketing position as associate brand manager. And in 2013, she moved to Mars Pet Care, and she's held several marketing brand management positions and is now a senior marketing director for Mars Pet Care. So Melody, if you wouldn't just take yourself off of turn on your camera and fill in what I didn't do. I was just giving the introduction, but tell the group a little bit about you and maybe some background to help them where you're coming from in your kind of your experience that's going to come through in this career management and work-life balance tonight.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Joel. So great. Great to be here. Thanks so much for asking me. As Joel mentioned, I transitioned through Cameron Brooks out of the Air Force in 2010 after spending 7 awesome years as an intelligence officer. Started out at Kraft Foods as an ABM. That's where I was placed. Had a great director who also himself was a Cameron Brooks alum. I think there's probably several of us like that around here. And then made the switch to Mars, where I've been for the last 8 years. I lead our dry dog portfolio of brands at Mars. So brands you guys probably heard of: Pedigree, Iams, Nutro. Those are some of our bigger brands. And I live in Nashville. I'm married, and I just had a son this year. He is 8.5 exciting months old. And so I do now feel more able to address this work-life balance question that Joel is talking about. So that's me, and excited to be here.
Excellent. And I do want the audience to know, just so, because I knew Melody was going to be here, I have one of my dogs who's 15, actually, that we got him from the pound many years ago, sitting behind me. So if you hear him making a little bit of noise, he just always loves being in here with me. And I thought, hey, we got Melody here, so I might as well chime in with my plug for Mars Pet Care.
Absolutely. That's what we love. I have my puppy Liam next to me too. So
I'm trying to get Chuck to let us take our pets to work. I'm not sure
it's going to work. Come on, Chuck.
I'm not sure it's going to work. Okay, so the next one we have here is Carl Case. Transitioned from the Navy to Ernst & Young, now EY, also in 2010. Carl is now a partner and an enormous champion for JMOs, as all three of our alum are. I should have said that about Melody as well, and leads the financial crimes compliance technology practice in the U.S. And Carl, if you turn on your video, and introduce yourself, and the group can get to know you as well.
Oh, thanks for that, Joel, and appreciate the invitation here tonight. Like the rest of the panelists here, I think very grateful for the transition help. Now back in the day, and looking forward to the discussion here tonight. As Joel mentioned, transition to EY, into the consulting space and into what sounds like a pretty niche area in financial crimes technology. Back in 2010, and have basically grown up through the practice over the last 11 years, and about 3 years ago took over operating the practice as the lead partner. So have worked with a number of global financial institutions. If you think about the biggest banks in the world, probably most of them have been my clients at one point or another during my career, and work with a great set of individuals, including some more Cameron Brooks alum that we continue to hire and have hired along the way. So looking forward to the discussion, and thanks everyone for joining in here.
Thank you, Carl. And our last panelist here, only he's last just because he transitioned in 2004. He's not quite as old as I am, but did want to put him last for that. So he's a former Army officer, Mike DeBach, that transitioned to NextEra Energy in 2004. And Mike, I think I have this right because we actually didn't connect before you made a couple of changes, but spent 13 years with NextEra before, I think, taking 1 year off from NextEra and being the CEO of the Economic Council for Palm Beach, Florida, returning back to NextEra, and now is the Executive Director for Business Development and Digital Transformation. And I've been able to stay in touch with Mike a few times over the years, and always great to connect them. So Mike, if you would take yourself off video, introduce yourself to the group. And again, thank you for being here.
Hey, no worries. Good evening. I'm the guy from Florida, and I'm wearing a sweater. So it's colder than 80 degrees, and so I had to put on a sweater today. So it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Joel. You are an ambassador for all of us, and what you and the Cameron Brooks team do every day makes a difference not only for the military officers that are transitioning, but for the companies of our great country. So thank you and the team at Cameron Brooks. I am an '04 alum. I'm a unique guy. At the conference that I was at, not only was I there, but my sister was there.
I know, by the way, I almost asked her to be a panelist too. It's like, no, that's going to be too weird.
That'd be too weird. So my sister and my brother-in-law and I were all at the same conference, and so the competition was on. So I had an opportunity to join NextEra Energy, which is the largest renewable energy company in the world, and grow my career at this company through our supply chain, from our supply chain into international business development, where I was responsible for our Canadian market growth. Then I went to Europe and was responsible for our Spanish energy sector, then returned to the United States and developed gas infrastructure, natural gas pipelines all through the southeastern and mid-Atlantic states. I did take a year off from the company to drive a political agenda in the state of Florida, then returned back to the company to facilitate a integration of a large utility that we bought. And I'm now leading the transformation of our renewable business so that we can grow our market share and speed to market. So that's my journey. I'm married with two beautiful kids. One's a freshman at SMU in Dallas, did not get her to a military academy, and the other's a freshman in high school. So we find home in East Coast Florida in the great the great town of Jupiter.
Very good. Thank you, you all. So first of all, for all the alum that are participating to learn here, the chat is open. And just start chatting in questions as we go. And I have my colleague, Hope Nunnally, who works remotely for Cameron Brooks here in Auburn, Alabama. She owns our Auburn office, if you will. So we're broadening. Actually, her spouse has a job in sports communications with Auburn University. So she's based out there. So she'll be monitoring that and texting me with questions that you guys all are asking. But I thought it was really interesting, and I don't know who wants to take this first. Why do you think it's probably from a lot of the first 5-6 year alum, I would think. Why do you think the number one thing is, like, how do you manage your career progression? It seems to me when I'm talking to a lot of our alum in the first year, and we do a lot more of that now, by the way, the three of you, we now have a programmed 6-month call after we place them to check in with them. And the number one question I get is, hey, how do I start thinking about my promotion and managing my career track? And sometimes, like, man, that seems so early to be doing that. But I put myself in their shoes, and you're in the military, you're 6 months into your first role, you're already thinking about what's the next coming next. So, maybe I throw it to one of you. How come you think this was the number one topic? And what do they mean, do you think, what progression means?
So Joel, I'll take a stab at it. I think it's probably the hardest cultural transition for us as military officers, right? Because we have a very prescribed program in the military. To the extent that you don't do something illegal, immoral, or unethical, right? There's a relatively deliberate path to progression. When you enter corporate America, that deliberate path erodes. You're now in this sea of in the sea of unknowns, and whether somebody gets promoted within a year and somebody gets promoted within 6 years and somebody gets promoted within 8 years, we're all kind of confused because there's not that deliberate path. My first advice is to ignore what others do and focus on deliberate execution every single day. What we as military officers bring to corporate America, I still believe, is a prized possession. We've hired a whole slew of military officers here at NextEra, and we focus on execution, and the results drive career path. So number one is always focus on the execution and on the results. The second is establish a mentor, not your immediate supervisor, not your immediate supervisor's supervisor, but find a C-suite executive that you connect with naturally, not unnaturally, but naturally, and allow that C-suite executive and you to journey together in a mentor-mentee relationship. And I think that's extraordinarily powerful. And the third, and this is a dose of my own medication, is a pill of patience. In corporate America, we move fast when we need to, and we move slow when we want to. And career progression is not always the fastest thing on the planet. If you want to drive and direct your own career progression in corporate America, I always say leave corporate America and become an entrepreneur, because then you're CEO of yourself. But as long as you're in an enterprise with more than three people, and you're not the CEO, you will never directly control your career. And that's something that you have to rely on your performance and your network to advance.
Melody, or I'm going to let you come in because there's a specific question that came in for Carl. So do you have anything to chime in on, what does progression mean to you? Does it mean differently than maybe it did in the first 1 or 2 years now that you've been exposed to so many different things?
Yeah, I think Mike is totally right in saying it's non-linear a lot of times, and that ambiguity can be really tough to handle, right? It's not laid out in front of you. And you kind of have to chart your course. I think coming from maybe the softer business side in specialty in marketing and really connecting with consumers in consumer packaged goods, it's so much about relationship building in the organizations that I've been in. And Mike kind of talked about it. I'll just build on getting to know people and letting them know you. What we are about is delivering results and building high performing teams. And that is really valued. But if the senior executives around you kind of don't know you and don't know what you're about, they can't be there for you. And it's definitely those sponsorship relationships that help you get where you want to get. I think a lot of times where I see JMOs maybe go wrong out of the gate is, we have this I will absolutely do this no matter what on my own. And if I ask for help, I'm weak. And it's actually very counterproductive to building your career. I think people want you to ask for help, want to give you advice, want to coach you. And if you can find someone, to Mike's point, that you naturally connect with to coach you, you're just going to be so much more successful. And out of that vulnerability, I think you'll really see your career really take off.
Great point, Melody, in terms of reaching out and people want to help you. I want to get Carl here in a second because there's a question for him. I have a daughter that's the total opposite of me. I'm an introvert, which people don't know about. It's probably why I'm really good at a small company. But it's a struggle for me what Melody says to go out and get people engaged. And my oldest daughter just started her business career as an engineer with Stryker Medical, and she's supposed to be working remotely 3 days of the week, 2 days in the office. She's going in the office most of the days. It's why are you doing that? She says, I just need to go in. I'm scheduling appointments with managers and people from other departments because I just got to get to know these people. And she's not even gunning where she wants to go next. She just wants to have these relationships. And it's ultimately how she got she didn't get through Cameron Brooks. In fact, my brother-in-law is very high up. He didn't get it through him. She did an internship on her own in regulatory affairs and had networked through lunches into the engineering department, and they got an interview. And I thought, that's exactly it. She's not thinking about what job do I want, but what relationships? Who do I need? What do I need to learn? Where do I need to grow? Who do I need to know to sponsor me in this? But Carl, you got somebody out there that works for maybe not the same financial crimes practice, but one of your competitors in the consulting industry. And he says, how the heck did you make partners so fast? Which is actually a great question. How? Well, I know because I know you. You're like the other two panelists here. You're amazing. But what did you do? What happened? How did you get there?
Yeah, so I'd say there's probably two elements to it. One of which I think Melody and Mike touched on, right? Which I thought was somewhat unique to consulting, but I always like these panels because you get to hear another perspective, and that's relationships, right? And so as much as any job, I think relationships are key in consulting. I think we're going to talk a little bit about finding coaches and mentors in your career. But my number one rule in terms of guiding my career was find smart people and make yourself indispensable to them. If you're the right hand for the smartest guys in the room, I mean, eventually you get included in that smartest guys in the room group, and it propels your career forward, right? Building those close relationships, making yourself indispensable to the guys that are getting stuff done means that you're also getting stuff done, and in most cases it's going to be the strategic important things for your organization. The other one I think is common sense, but sometimes maybe not, is just putting in the time, putting in the work. Some of the stuff I picked up along the way from Cameron Brooks and Roger's old sage advice on doing your homework and putting in the extra time definitely paid dividends, right? For years, I was probably one of the earlier guys into the office. I would be one of the later guys to leave. And that's not to say that you have to work longer or work, harder, not smarter. I'm a big proponent of working smarter, not harder. But at the same time, if you get an extra 30 minutes or an hour a day, that adds up quick. When especially in a space where knowledge is power, and what you're able to get done for your clients can sometimes be pushed that extra 10% with that extra hour a day.
As you were telling me that, it just reminded me of that great book. I'm sure some of you that are here a little bit older, Randy Pausch from the last lecture book talked about his life before he passed away, and he had terminal cancer, and he made tenure at Carnegie. I think it was Carnegie Mellon. Like, how did you do that? And he said, listen, you're not making tenure just because you're just here. I work hard. I'm here later. I'm here first. I'm early. I'm getting things done. I just go the extra mile. So Carl, as you said, that reminded me of that book. And so those of you that have not read the book, it's not about great career progressions, but it also help you think about work-life balance as we get into that second subject. So as we go to this another question, we won't get to all the questions that I created ahead of time, guys, because we're already 20 minutes into this thing. We could be here all night. So how? Right. Actually, I'm not really an expert at this because Cameron Brooks' career progression was like survive, right? His laugh was like survive Roger and Renee. And I love him to death, but it was like just survive and work hard. And I did. And I outlasted other people and delivered value. So I don't have a great one, like as Mike says, in a group of 3. How do you do this? So how do you create a map? Let's see if you're year 1, 2, 3, 4. How do we talk to our alum that are here in their first 5 years? And there might be alum that are here longer. They're like, what would you say to them to be saying, okay, how do you create a map? How do you create a plan? Is there a plan? I don't direct it at any of you because I don't know who wants to go first.
I can start this one. So I get asked this a lot by people, and we also hire JMOs over here at Mars as well. There's a few of us floating around. You got to know where you want to go. Like, that's the biggest thing when people come to talk to me, right? You got to tell me where you want to go. And I think where people fall down is like it can be ambitious, right? Like, I can say, I want to be the chief marketing officer of a global company, but I got to tell you where I'm going. And then you can help me get there because like we talked about before, career progression isn't linear. There's a bunch of options, right? It's kind of like the old books where you could like choose your ending and go to whatever page you wanted to go to. I could be a general manager, right? I could be a marketing professional, but I got to say where I want to go and then enroll people to help me get there. And then you kind of look at the steps along the way. So if that's my North Star, if I say when I hang all this up, if I'm not going to be happy unless I was a chief marketing officer, then I need to back that train all the way up and begin to move towards that path. And I think that's really important. And then the other thing I always tell people is you got to learn and develop along the way. Don't take a job just because you think it looks good on your resume. Take a job because it's going to bring you skills that you're missing. It's going to make you better in areas that maybe you're not as good at. Like that is also critical. People who lean into the hard stuff, the hard jobs, the jobs nobody else wants, those are the people who end up really accelerating their careers.
Melody,
I would-
chime in on that. We just have this document that just went out, not for the alum, but for our prospective candidates, and it's advice from we have several of our alum that are CEOs now, right? And some of them are CFOs. And there's a gentleman named John Tunison, former Navy nuke officer. He's the CFO of Trustway Manufacturing, and it was the number one piece of advice he gives. He said, take the hard jobs. He said, I look back at my career, I took jobs exactly that. So it was going to look good. It was going to pay more, better location. I was like, it didn't do anything to help me get to my ultimate goal of where I wanted to go. So such great advice. Somebody was going to jump in, and I
totally agree with that. It's often said, folks will ask me like, why did you take that job? Because nobody else would take that job, is my answer, right? Being an outlier in assuming calculated risk is totally fine. And if you're confident in your capacity to lead and subsequently your capacity to execute, then there really is no risk. Because when Carl said you surround yourself with smart people, and as the leader, you can inspire that intelligence, and then you can execute, that's the success. That's the success equation without question. However, I think it is important to ask ourselves, why do we work, right? And if our goal is to be CEO, there is a very deliberate path to set that goal. If our goal is to be a balanced human being, there is a deliberate path to set that balanced human being. I live by an equation called the 5 F's. It's not mine, it's John Maxwell's. And the 5 F's are faith, family, finance, fitness, and fun. And I'm a former Apache helicopter pilot, so we would measure everything. We'd have gauges that would tell us whether we were in limits or out of limits, and information tell us whether we were within the range of a certain target or not. But that faith, family, finance, fitness, and fun equation, right, can be very, very clearly measured. And remember that a job is a source of finance, which is one element of a 5-element equation. I'll leave you with that thought. Each of you will think of it differently and absorb it differently, but there is a five variable equation to which income represents one of the 5 variables.
And as you say that, I feel very fortunate, at least with my career, with what we do at Cameron Brooks. It's not only finance, but we get to have some fun, and we don't have to check our values at the door. So it's a small private 20-person company. We can have the faith, bring in our faith. And, so as you mentioned, I've not heard the 5 F's from Maxwell. And I know you're tied in really well to them. So hope, if you're listening, can you find a link to that and drop that in the chat, maybe for the group to take a look at? I'd like to take the next question over to Carl. Carl, if you look back over your career, again, amazingly successful. You're sponsoring so many JMOs and obviously building a practice that maybe 10 years ago, they didn't even have a financial crimes practice. What are like the 2 or 3 pivotal moments, decisions that you made, investments that you made that, hey, you think that other people that are going through this journey might benefit from?
Well, there's a story. There's a story I like to tell folks that dates me a little bit. From my very first project at EY, I got here, very first project, talked to some folks on the ground, asked them, hey, so what do we really need to know to do this? And they go, for you techie guys, you'll understand this. You probably need to know SQL, which is a database query language, how you access data. and you could probably use some Python coding too. And so this is how I date myself. I went to the bookstore and picked up, SQL for Dummies and learned Python in 21 days, and got to work, right? So found out the technical skills that were needed to do the job. This is again, going back to Roger Cameron's advice, go do your homework, and went and did the homework. And I think that laid the foundation for a lot of success on that first project and a lot of subsequent projects that required this more technical skill set and to really dig in and understand, right? It wasn't just about managing people and moving things in project deadlines from place to place, but really digging into the content and the technical knowledge that was necessary, and proving yourself to other technical experts at your company, at your clients in that space, that you could hold your own. So to me, that was a big pivotal moment. The other, and this question I think comes across a lot with JMOs, is value of an MBA. So I did ultimately go and pursue an MBA while I was with EY. Luckily, the firm sponsored me for that, but it was a big goal of mine. And I found that I started it about 5 years into my time at the firm, which I think was the right point. I had good corporate experience that I could apply in the classroom. And at that time, the thinking around business strategy, competitive advantage, pricing structures, et cetera, were all very appropriate for that next step into my career as a partner, starting to strategize, where we would focus our efforts, our people, coming up with new products and services. I think those two elements, right when I started, and then making that next step to partner and more strategic thinking were two big moments for me.
Carl, I'm glad if we could stay on that, and this goes for everybody. Let's go into the MBA. Can we go back to these 6-month check-in calls? I just had them as we were creating this panel here and getting this rolling. I had a series of 6-month check-in, and I went in a row like, Joel, hey, what can I help you with today? We start the call. Well, Joel, I think I got to get my MBA. I go, how am I supposed to start with my MBA? I was like, whoa, you're just there 6 months. Everything we've just talked about, you should be thinking about, how can I deliver value? How can I crush it? How can I give results? Who can I build mentors with? But how should be people with you? I know we all have our own unique experiences where we are, might be different for every company, but maybe together we could come up with or each individual, how should one be thinking about their MBA in the first, maybe let's just start with a year. When do they start thinking about the MBA and why?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So personally, I had actually gotten my MBA part-time while I was still in the service, because I didn't know what to do with my life. And I majored in.
Weren't you in Hawaii when you got that, by the way, or something like that?
I know.
I can tell you what you do with your life in Hawaii.
I know. I majored in foreign languages in undergrad. That was what the government saw fit. They wanted me to learn Russian, so I did. And I thought, that's not very useful down the line. So I should pick up an MBA because that seems like it generally be more helpful. And what I would say, and what I tell people is, don't do it in the beginning. Kind of like Carl said, you got to learn your career, you got to learn your profession, you got to add value, you got to figure out how to be an effective member of that organization and that team. But I do tell my people, education is never wrong. Getting more education is never a bad idea. And I think for a lot of us, what it gives us at a minimum is the language to talk to other people on some of these other topics. I think for me, it was finance. As a marketing person, I don't do P&Ls day to day, but I'm responsible for one and I need to be conversant with one. And that was I studied foreign languages. That was an area I was lacking. For other people, it's supply chain, right? So I just think, I think it's important. I think education will always help you, but in the beginning, you just got to focus on delivering where you are and hit the ground running.
I'd agree with that. I think about it. I got my MBA. I joined corporate America in 2004. I got my MBA in 2000. 14, I think it was, about 10 years post transition. I look at it like this. It's like we all come out of the basic course and we go out and be platoon leaders in the Army, right? And we progress as platoon leaders. And then there's a natural point where you know that you need more training in order to be an effective, staff officer and to be like a 3, right? Or something of this nature. So off you go to advanced course. You come out of advanced course and then you've got that incremental training to be able to go and be effective, staff officer in a battalion or in a brigade and stuff of this nature. So I think it's the same thing in your corporate journey. There are points in your corporate journey where you will realize that it's time for more education, right? Like I was running a development team in Canada and my boss kept talking about EBITDA and discounted cash flows and present value and stuff of this nature. And one day I actually went to his office and I said, "Can I ask you a question?" He says, "What's that?" I said, "I have no idea what you mean when you say EBITDA." And he said, "Shut the door." And I said, "I shut the door." And he goes, "Mike," he goes, he was one of my mentors. He goes, "Mike," he goes, "I am so happy you asked me that question, but don't ask anyone else on this floor what the heck EBITDA is." And so he gave me like Finance for Dummies book, right? So I read Finance for Dummies like a good person, back and forth on airplane trips. And I realized at that moment in time that it was time for me to go truly learn the language of finance. And that was rooted within my MBA. And so off when I went to MBA. The other question, Joel, what do you choose for your school, right? MBA is done for 2 reasons: to continue your education or to make a step change in your career, right? If you're continuing your education, you're satisfied with the enterprise that you are doing, then do an executive MBA program in conjunction with your employment and use the local network that you're going to develop through the local business school that's in your community to enhance your local, your local network so you can be a better community steward. If you're looking for it to be a catalyst to the next level of another enterprise and you're looking at it as a career transition point, then I would say, step back and go apply to some of the big name, business schools that do not allow executive MBAs or part-time MBAs or things of this nature that require full-time education and full-time students, and use that then as a career step or a career change, element for you. But I went to Florida Atlantic University in Boca Raton, Florida, and met an amazing group of South Florida business leaders and got the education and curriculum that I was seeking. Those would be my thoughts for you, Joel and the team.
Yeah, but Carl, you do you have anything to weigh in on that? You hire a lot of JMOs. You're in a finance. Okay, you live in the finance world, for example. I think, and this is just my perception. I've never even consulting might be a world where maybe the credential matters a little bit more. I don't know. That's just my kind of perception. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, what I find is because I'm a technology consultant, it's not as heavy as if you're trying to go into investment banking or you want to go be a strategy consultant, right? So if your ultimate objective is to go work at McKinsey or BCG or Bain, it's definitely the MBA will help you out. If you're looking to move into more general consulting, and you're looking at Big Four, Accenture, some of the other consulting firms that are out there, not necessarily corporate strategy consulting. An MBA, I would hold off on until you're at a latter stage in your career and you're starting to set strategic direction at like the practice or like the solution level, right? And you're starting to figure out, well, what solutions do I bring out to the market? How do I price them? What are clients looking to buy? Some things that really come into play. If you look at the consulting space, it's really like running a small business. So as you get into running a small business of your own, the MBA becomes more helpful.
To Carl's point, our CFO, so at NextEra Energy Inc., right, we have 2 public tickers, NEE and NEP. Combined reference is about $132 billion market cap company. Our CFO has an undergrad from Duke, period.
Yeah.
And no MBA. No, and she's CFO of one of the largest energy companies in the world.
Which I want to hang on to this because here I just kind of summarize. I think what I hear from if we pull all this together is, especially those that are early on in their transition, instead of the eagerness to I need to get my MBA, it seems like what I've heard is the priority if I could put piece is relationships, mentors, kind of getting an idea of where do you see yourself in 4 or 5 years, then developing the relationships and mentors, delivering the results and getting the experience that gets you there versus I think there's this assumption that this MBA becomes a ticket to get me there. Where what I hear, and this is what Roger Cameron always said, the MBA should be a tool, not necessarily a ticket, the tool that helps you be better at your job so that you know what EBITDA is and you can talk intelligently, at least ask intelligent questions about it. That's what I hear. But frankly, again, because I have only anecdotally what I hear from you all and my own experience at Cameron Brooks, which is a small company. I got my MBA in the School of Hard Knocks. Just, we manage it along the way. We do our own marketing. We do our own finances. We have our own IT. It's a little easier. But that's what I hear, which leads to this next thing. And I'd love to get all three of your perspectives. We'll let Melody start. Your personal hacks for self-development. What are your habits? What do you do to focus on self-development? And Melody, you could take us what books do you read, blogs, podcasts, mentors? And, I'd also like to hear it specifically. Is there anything from a woman in leadership perspective and managing your career? Could you add anything in on that?
Yeah. Wow. Career hacks. It's a big one. No matter what you do, you have to stay on top of what's happening in your profession, right? I think marketing is fascinating because it's always changing. It's what I've always loved about it. When I started out doing this, TikTok didn't exist. Now you have to do ads on TikTok, right? So staying on top of the trends, I subscribe to industry publications and I use newsletters a lot. I'm sorry, I read my email like an old person. There's a lot of really good newsletters out there in any career profession where you can just get real-time updates. And I do that and sign up for Google alerts too. That's always a good one. Google will tell you real quickly what you need to be looking at. But beyond that, man, being a woman too, it's always tough. It was tough in the military. It's tough now. I would never pretend to tell anybody that there isn't, what we call it now is unconscious bias, right? No one does it on purpose. That's why it's so subversive. It's an unconscious thing. You think about it, it affects a lot of groups of people, different minorities, women. And I think what I always tell people is being aware of that, but not letting it control your actions. I show up as me, whatever meeting I'm in. And when you're a leader, you're tough, but you're approachable. People respect that. People will gravitate towards you. Those are the kind of people that you want to be around, regardless of gender or cultural background. So being true to who you are is the best advice I ever give people. And then you got to find someone to support, like what we were talking about earlier, a mentor, someone you can bounce ideas off of, someone senior to you in the company, but someone whom you can really trust. I'm fortunate to have landed at a company, Mars, which is also a family-owned company, a little bit larger than Cameron Brooks, but it's the same space, where the culture is collaboration and asking, calling up. I can call up the global president and ask for 30 minutes to talk about my career, and she'll give it to me. Take advantage of those people and those organizations and those cultures to actually take people up on that. I know I said it before, but people will always want to help you if you just reach out and ask for their perspective.
I want to just build on one thing on that. Again, we had the C-suite people put advice out there, and there was one from a gentleman named Dave Barbuto, transitioned in 2004 as well. And his biggest thing is that the Cameron Brooks, and he's talking about Cameron Brooks alum, the former veterans, they want to help. Reach out. They want to help. It could be cross industries. It could be cross companies to be able to help you. And that's a great way to learn. But thank you, Melody, for that. We probably could go into a whole nother webcast on what you talked about, unconscious bias and some of that experience. And I'm sure we need to have should do a webcast on that. Carl, your best practices on learning, development, continuous learning and development that you would like to pass on to others.
I mean, I love a good podcast. All the TED Talk related podcasts. I love those.
That's because you ride the subway every morning or something like that, and you have like 30
Yeah,
minutes.
I mean, I've got an hour-long commute, right? So anything I can listen to that, while I read emails or just veg out and listen to some stuff is great. But not just in your own industry area, right? Folks on my team always know one of my favorite sayings is that innovation is just stealing things from other domains and reapplying them to your space. So I like to hear a lot about innovations in other areas. How I Built This is a great podcast. I love to go to conferences. Conferences are a great way to stay up on your content, but I also love to go to conferences in slightly adjacent, not entirely related space. You'd think, as a financial crimes guy, sure, I'm at the financial crimes conference. Most of that is business development and talking to clients, but I also like to just go to general technology and analytics conferences just so I can see stuff that the aerospace industry is doing or that manufacturing is doing in analytics to speed process improvement, because I can steal those ideas and apply them now to financial crimes technology in the finance space and financial services. And, it might not be new in aerospace. They might have been doing it for 20 years, but it'll be brand new in FS.
Carl, do you have a favorite podcast that you listen to that you could plug here that might be helpful for people?
There's one in particular. It's called Exponential Wisdom. It talks a bit about it takes some general ideas around how you take a small improvement, and if you think about tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 of that small improvement, how it drastically changes the way that we think and that we look at things. It really just gets your mind going on next level problem solving and downstream impacts.
Anecdotally, again, I keep chiming in here with a little bit of I've been using Audible as my drive back and work to consume books. It's almost like each chapter becomes a mini podcast, and that exponential improvement, the book Atomic Habits, is something that builds on the exponential improvement. That's a plug for me that I'm reading the book now about just these 1% little changes can make a big change in everything that you do. And a plug for using your time when you're working out or when you're driving to listen to podcasts. What about you, Mike? What are some of your podcasts?
I don't listen to podcasts, but I do a lot of reading. And I do a lot of talking with people. So I'm the guy that if you sit next to me on the plane, we're going to have a conversation and we're going to enjoy our time that we sit six inches away from each other if you're lucky, 2 inches if you're unlucky, away from each other. And I'm going to learn as much as about you as a human in your profession and your career, because I believe that the best resource is your network. And so the broader the network is, the broader you have the capacity to pull upon that network to help you learn or help you zero in on a specific topic or a specific issue that you're thinking through or facing. So books and an extraordinarily broad and meaningful network.
And I misasked the question. Melody had to let in my old dog back into the room here, so I got distracted. Mike, I meant to ask, what are your because I know you've been tied in with Maxwell. What do you do for self-development?
I read a lot. So I'm a big believer in finding an author that connects and then following his or her literature all the way through the process. So I read a lot of books by Simon Sinek. I think his thought process is extraordinarily powerful. We'll start with the why. I'm a big Maxwell reader. I read a lot of entrepreneurial books. I thought Delivering Happiness was a phenomenal book by a gentleman that unfortunately his life ended way too early. But his story and his approach to business was so different than what everybody else's would. And then typically I take those books and I do YouTube them like Carl talked about. I think the TED Talks are interesting. But I typically YouTube their books and listen to them speak in different audiences and so on and so forth, whether they're at Harvard or whether they're at Apple or they're at Google. I try to find an environment where an author I respect is speaking, and I listen very carefully to how they address and connect to the audience.
And I'll just chime in here. Some of the things that I do, I shared with, I try to have a book on Audible, and I also try to keep one book that is non-pleasure. That, you know, it's interesting, Mike. It's usually around faith, fitness, finances, or family. And if I'm doing something fun, it's that usually for reading, that's usually on the side. But I usually have one book that I rotate through there. And then I think one of the biggest things that I've learned in learning is, and I learned this, unfortunately, I think I learned this too late in my career. I wanted to be, and I'm still in the middle, I got a long ways to go. I wish I had done it earlier, is inviting more people in to conversations. I think sometimes I was a little bit, I wouldn't say I was autocratic, but I would have a very black, and I've taken my personality as I'm a very black and white thinker. And the older I've gotten, the more I invite people into, if this is the problem, what do you think? I think it was Bill Marriott, the founder, chairman of Marriott Hotels International's favorite phrase is, what do you think? And I try to keep that. And I think I just like, wow, people don't see, this is obvious, right? But people don't see the world that you see the world. I'm sure Melody already knows that from marketing, but people don't see the world that you do. And because you see it a certain way doesn't always make it adamantly right. And I've learned, we hired this one gentleman about 2.5 years ago in talent acquisitions from another company. I'm so glad we hired him because he brought a totally different way to think about our business that we didn't even know it, but we so badly needed, because the dynamics in our market were changing, the technology was changing. But if I was so beholden to, hey, this is work, this is our best practice, we would have fallen behind. So be open to other ideas, ask other people what they think. Mike, the other thing I loved about you, I don't know what you mean by EBITDA. I think this is what I've also learned. I've been I was invited, asked to be on the board of our healthcare system. It's Hill Country Health here in the Hill Country of Texas. And I think that they like me, and I think that they don't like me on the board. So I'm constantly raising my hand and say, what do you mean by that? How come this? And like, oh, we never thought that most lay people don't get it, so we're not healthcare providers. But ask questions, be curious, and you're not expected to always know the answer. Back to Melody's point, I think where we started off is, I think as military officers, we're afraid. I'm supposed to do this, do it on my own. And if I ask, it's a sign of weakness. But I think corporate America, managers like it. Mike's manager might be like, I'm glad you asked, don't mention this to anybody else. It's a funny story. Great topic. Okay, I got one more question. I know we've only got like 20 more minutes, but I really think this is important, because I think sometimes we've talked about all the positive things that we can do to manage your career, but we go through valleys. I have to, hopefully I'm not the only one. We go through valleys, we go through slumps, we go through stress. My experience is that during those is that I see, because I get to see a lot of careers, poor career decisions are made because of the slump and the valley. Instead of using that slump and that valley to slingshot us back up to something higher, I think sometimes I sometimes see people bail. Not always the worst thing if it's a really bad one, but what's your experience on a slump, a valley, your hacks, your best practices? Either you went through it or you saw somebody go through. What did they do? How do you use that for your career progression?
Yeah, I see people, I think we probably all do, make a lot of bad decisions. Look, we all have bad days, bad years sometimes. The last couple of years have been particularly challenging, I think, for a lot of us, for a lot of businesses, for a lot of professions, for a lot of us personally. I mean, I apparently, like Mike, am an extreme extrovert, and sitting at home in my house talking to my computer all day is like the most depressing thing that ever happened to me. But you always have to remember, don't run away from something, run to something. Like, we make our worst decisions when we're in these, I'll call it the trough of despair, when we're in these like very low places. And in those low places, I think you can trick yourself into thinking that anything is better than this, but that's never the case. you have to keep, again, I'll go back to like, what is your goal? And is this going to be a job, a role, a change that moves me towards that long-term goal, that brings new experiences that I'm going to value into my life? Or am I just running away from something because I'm just going through a tough spot right now?
I just put in the chat a book that I was reading when my oldest daughter was going through sophomore year in college. It's called The Dip by Seth Godin. And it's a short book, but it talks about how we go through these dips and the choices that we have and how working through the dip can actually slingshot you, as I used earlier up to the top. So take a look at that. Carl, anything to add there on, I mean, I know, New York, tough work, long hours, high travel. From your perspective, how do you navigate through this?
Yeah, I mean, my advice is pretty simple, but some of it's just to stay positive. There are going to be challenging times, I think, in every career. So it's funny. The question got asked earlier. How the heck did you make it as a partner in 7 years? Well, I was very upset that I didn't make it in 6, and in hindsight, that didn't matter one bit. But at the moment, it seemed like a crisis. So some of it's about perspective, thinking about the long-term implications, and just staying positive in the situation, right? In that situation, it'd be very easy to kind of get in a slump and let a year go to waste. But that, looking back on it now, those were some of the times where I dug in, found some of the biggest challenges that I could solve, address some of the biggest clients, some of the biggest projects that I could, and made the best out of the situation. And long term in a career, I mean, I think I came out stronger for it, and it definitely would have been a mistake to do anything rash in that valley of my career.
And I had no intention of coming here to talk about the last lecture by Randy Pausch, but it just comes up again. He talks in that book, is brick walls are built to keep other people out. I mean, are you going to go up over them, or are you not? But they're there for the other people, not for you. And okay, well, we're gonna, without keeping everybody here for all night, let's go over to the work-life balance, which this is going to be interesting, in my opinion, because I have a philosophy on this, and I don't know if it's everybody else's. Mike kind of shared a little bit of his. Why don't we start with you, Mike? You talked about your 5 F's. You obviously have thought a little bit about this. You've been through it with 2 older children. We'll get to Melody here with a young one home, and Carl, we'll get to you in a second here. But how do you do? Is it important to you? How do you balance it? What's your philosophy on this?
I do balance it. I focus on it every single day. It is my North Star, to use Melody's term, because I was listening to your topic, and it centers around everything I do. And so, I have my job. Obviously, I sit on the board of 4 nonprofits. 2 of them I chair. I have a daughter that's a freshman in college and a freshman in high school, and a wife of 21 years. And so it is a constant and evolving equation. And the other day I went to the doctor, and I had higher cholesterol and high sugar, and I was weighed 196 on the scale, and I said, that's it, I'm going down 20 pounds. And I make a declaration, and I say it to the family, and I say I'm my health or my fitness is out of sync, and I'm going back to solve it. And to the other point, if you're down in a slump, that means your fun factor is low. Go skydive, right? Or go do something to completely change the perspective of your current situation. Because the second that you change your perspective, you become thoughtful and introspective, and realize suddenly, right, that life's not so bad. I chair Habitat for Humanity. I love the nonprofit. right? You have a bad day at work. You step into the mission field of a nonprofit solving some of our most socially critical issues. And all of a sudden, you get back into your four-door sedan, you turn on the key, and you drive back to suburbia or wherever you may live, and you realize all of a sudden, if I had to throw all my problems into a problem pile with everybody else's, you grab yours back first, and immediately your perspective has changed. So that balance equation is my root, Joel, and I use my civic and my family engagement to continue to keep me in check.
That's good. Thanks, Mike. I think what I take away from that is have some interests outside of work, some service, some time with family, and obviously take care of your health. What about you, Melody? Boy, this will be interesting. An 8-month-old. I wasn't a mom, but I remember 8-month-olds.
Yeah.
And, I've had 4 along the way, and it's
I don't know how
never the
people do
mom.
more. I don't know how people do more than one, Joel. So bless you for that. One, I was like, damn, I don't know how people do this more than one time. So even before the baby, though, I will say, I've always maintained a work-life balance. I try not to work past 7 p.m. and I try like hell not to work on Saturday and Sunday. I think it's about maximizing the time that you're in the office, and focusing on the big things. Don't waste your time on bullshit. Like, figure out what are the 4 things that matter and spend your time on those things, and then build a super smart team of people around you who can take care of the rest of it. But from a balance perspective, I remember when I was thinking about leaving the Air Force, and I think most of us loved what we did, and we didn't leave because we didn't love it. We left for other reasons. And when I was thinking about leaving, someone I really respected said to me, this job's never going to love you back. And you're not going to be old and say, I wish I'd spent more time at work. And I always keep that in my mind, especially on the bad days. This job, whatever job it is, my job, Carl's job, Mike's job, even Joel's job, is never going to love you back.
Mhm.
So give it the space that it needs, but don't give it more than that.
I'll come back and give you my perspective in a minute, Melody, because I had somebody in the Army tell me the same thing. That's one of the reasons I got out. Carl, what about you? I think it's pretty easy consulting with your travel, billed by the hour, how easy it is to get caught up in the work-life balance.
Yeah, I'm never the guy to ask the work-life balance question, because I just in general probably operate in extremes most of the time. Earlier question, how do I make partner? I dug in and decided that the right balance and the right time in my life to progress and rapidly make career progression was that window of time. And so I dug in hard. 100-hour week was nothing, right? I got out, I was 28. Look, you can do consulting, pre 30, pulling a couple all-nighters in a week was not a big deal. Now you hit like 35 and you're like, the all-nighter doesn't feel so good anymore. So good, I got that out of the way early, right? But I think everyone finds the right balance at the right time in their life, with the job that they're doing. I feel like I found the right balances at the right times for me. Some of those setbacks that we talked about earlier in the timing was because, that timing and the balance I felt would be upset by some of the missed timings of certain events. I remember when I started my MBA, that was the year I promoted to senior manager, which is a step before partner here at EY. I started my MBA and my son was literally born on the first day of class. So that was a convergence of stress and events in my life that I did not plan for, but I came out the other side of that much better for it. So, if it gave me an experience that I look back on and I say, well, if I can handle that time in my life, I can handle anything. And so to me, I think everyone's got to sort of look inside and say, what's the right balance for you, for your family, and for what your objectives are, and sort of sort that out. I think it's a very personal decision.
So I think if I can chime in and give my experience here, probably more on the Carl side, making partner at Cameron Brooks with Chuck as the CEO, and I'm the only other partner within the organization. And I made a lot of decisions early in my career with wanting to become a partner, and that being a priority. I didn't always make the right decision on what I should do and where I should be. I think for me, what I would share with other people is try to make the very best decision that you can with what to use with your resources, your time, your knowledge, whether it be on boards, your money, whatever it is. That is what we talked about, the true north, your why, whatever it is. Try to figure out what that is, so that because you can't do that unless you know where you want to go and what you want to do. And I use this with a lot of times with people. Preferred futuring. In 5 years, what does a happy, successful life look like for you? 10 years, what does that look like for you? That'll help guide you. Do I stay here, do this? Do I stay here, do that? Do I invest in this? Do I do this graduate program at the same time? And so that would be my advice. And I would also tell you that it's okay if you don't get it 100% right, and don't beat yourself up, and do the best you can. I think your family will still love you for it. Whatever decisions you made. I mean, I look at pictures of my 2 oldest daughters that are out of the house, graduated. I just was visiting my in-laws. I had a picture of my 2 oldest ones, like hugging each other on my oldest daughter's first day of kindergarten. I was like, oh my gosh, what did I do? And I called my wife. I was like, look at this picture. I was like, what did I do? I missed this. She said, yes and no, but look, because you did those things, we now have the resources to pay for college. We had the resources they didn't have to take out on debt. We could send them to these schools. So there was an investment. I did make these things. And this is, I come back to, is that my philosophy on work-life balance lends to, I don't have work-life balance. Sometimes I have work and sometimes I have life. And I personally, sometimes it's work and I don't have a lot of life going on, and then work kind of subsides and I have more life. But they're rarely in this equilibrium for me. Like, we're getting ready for our November conference, and for the next 3 weeks, I'm not going to have a lot of life. It's going to be more work than it is going to be life. But things will slow down, and that's when I schedule my time to go visit my family and things like that. And the next thing I would say is, Melody and Mike alluded to this, and so did Carl, is I would recommend doing something, a hobby, something or some service, something outside of work that allows you to learn, to take care of your fitness, that allows you to disengage. That would be my advice. And mine was always exercise and working out. 2 years ago, right before the pandemic, I took up golf. There's probably only one thing, and there's one thing that I don't think of when I don't think about work. And you guys, I am pathetic. But when I'm on the golf course, I don't think about work. 2 in the morning, I think about work. Right now, thinking about work. An hour from now, I'm thinking about work. Play golf for some reason for 4 hours and I don't think about work. That would be my advice, is that you might not always be in equilibrium. Find what's important to you. Maybe write it down, journal it. One of the things that I do, and I'll stop talking, is every morning when I have my quiet time and I go into my prayer, the next thing that I write out is, what am I going to let go of today? What am I going to focus on instead? And then what am I grateful for? Those are 3 questions I ask myself every day, and I journal it. It would be one of my hacks I would share with people that really kind of like shocks me into what's important in my life. And I would share that all with you. So to kind of wrap this out, kind of go into the closing of the last question, we'll just start with Melody. Okay. You get to put a bow on everything that you said, and you could do it one of 2 ways, or you can do it any way you want, actually. You can either say, this is the best advice I ever received. Maybe it's don't love the job because it's not going to love you back. I've learned that even at Cameron Brooks Super Meaningful Work, the people love me back, but the organization, the job doesn't love me back. But what's the best advice, or what advice do you want to share in these closing thoughts with our audience out there about work-life balance or career progression, or just anything in general?
I love a broad platform, Joel.
Yes.
No, so I'm gonna stick with the veteranness of us all and say you were successful because you were a leader. People hired you because you're a leader. Do not forget to keep being a leader. No matter what happens, no matter what development, no matter what you look for, being a leader is what is most lacking in the world today. I don't care, look at any part of it. And that is the number one role we can play, whether it's at work, in our social lives, or, you know, in volunteering like Mike does. Just keep being a leader and find that source within you that gives you the energy to keep bringing that every day.
Thanks, Melody. Great advice. I will have one more question for you, but it's a super easy one when we end. Carl, got a broad platform.
Yeah, I'd say my number one advice is that, you know, your success will ultimately not, well, it will be driven by you, but it will also be mostly driven by the people that you surround yourself with, and the people that you build and are a part of your team. And so as we sort of started out the presentation and talking about relationships, remember that those relationships that you build with your team members are the important ones, both with your bosses and your superiors, as well as those that work with you and work for you. Those are the most important relationships that you can develop, and your success is ultimately going to be predicated by how that team is able to support you throughout your career.
It's good advice, Carl. Thank you. Kind of goes back to what we talked right in the beginning about the other people. What about you, Mike? How do you want to wrap this up?
Simple for me. Love people. Know your why. And don't communicate, but connect.
So I had an amazing mentor in college. His name was Bob Drebs, also a mentor. A veteran, Navy officer during Vietnam. And he was so generous to me, but he always said to me, when I was real motivated, type A, I got to graduate with a high GPA. I got to go into the Army, do this. He's like, stop. Remember, it's not what you do. It's who you are. And I think we've touched on a lot of that tonight. And Mike kind of just said that, love people. And remember, it's not what you do in life, it's who you are. It's loving people, it's being a good person, it's serving others, it's doing the very best that you can, mentoring and developing other people, giving back. And Roger Cameron said this a lot, and I kind of get tears in my eyes. I just played golf with him several weeks ago, and it was a great experience because this guy was like really tough on me, but he really cares about people. And he always said it's the little things that people are going to remember about you and your character. It's not going to be your big accomplishments. When it's all said and done, it's going to be these little things that people remember about you. So maybe that will help you with work-life balance and how to think about your career progression. Maybe take some of that pressure off of, I got to be here. I got to be here right now. I don't measure up. But what about this person? And compare myself to other people, but really look at you and where you want to be. And are you on track and authentic to yourself? Oh, wow. You guys have been amazing. So I got one last question for you guys. It's a really tough one. We're going to send a little gift out to you. You could change your mind, but I want to know, you want a cool Camera Brooks coffee mug, a hat. I might have golf balls, but I may have lost most of them. I don't know how many are back there anymore. I can look. So if you're a golfer, I can't promise that I've got many back there, but I got a nice coffee mug. It is really a super nice. And it's not like emblazed with cameras, like it's etched in, and it's made out of really fancy pottery out of a place out of Waco, or he can send you a baseball cap. What do you want, Melody?
I'm really into this mug, Joel. You 100% sold me on the mug.
All right. You'll love it. Carl?
I'm in for the golf balls if you can find them, but if not, I take a mug.
I will get you the golf balls. I'll find them. I'll make Chuck order some more or something like that. Golf balls. Mike?
Coffee for me.
Golfing. All right. Sounds good. Melody, Carl, Mike, thank you so much. All the alum that stayed on here for this evening to listen to it, all the alum that are watching the recording of this, my sincere gratitude to all of you for choosing to make your transition through us. And I'm just proud to be a partner with all of you. Stay in touch. And we'll get addresses from all three of you that are here, and we'll get the thank you gift out to you. Thank you so much from all of you guys, for all of you guys. Have a good night.